All right, so this is the first game of the Bradley Open tournament. My first round game, I played against Poliannikov. So I was paired to the second highest seed in the tournament. And yeah, so I played D4, trying a new repertoire this tournament. And I sort of knew ahead of this game that he played the Benoni. So we end up getting some preparation, I guess. Knight c3, e takes d5, c takes d5, d6, e4, g6, and then I had prepared this line with f4, and I had some ideas, but I really have not played this sort of thing with white. This was sort of a trial run for this opening. I'm not sure if I'll end up repeating it if I know that the future opponent is going to play the Benoni. So yeah, bishop g7, bishop e5 is the main move, knight f d7, a4, very important, not to allow like a6, b5, knight a6, knight f3, knight b4, castles, and now a6. So it's important to note here that in this position, after knight f3, I had looked at castles, and after I castle, then knight b4, and then I was planning on playing the move f5 here. And it's a very interesting move. It looks sort of counterintuitive because it gives this hole on e5, and if black tries to put the knight on e5, um, it sort of does look like it's very comfortable. But after knight e5, just knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, and um, queen e2, or bishop f4 first, and with the ideas of queen e2. This sort of position actually is difficult for black to play because the normal source of counterplay with f5 has been shut down with my pawn on f5. And if you ever end up taking the pawn on f5, then your king can be very vulnerable to attack. Some combination of, if a6, the bishop just drops back to c4. In this case, there's also bishop takes e5, but in other lines, the bishop drops back to c4, and yeah, it's just a very pleasant position for white to play. The king is sort of weak. It's difficult for black to figure out the development. So this was my plan going into this game. But instead of castling, we get a6 first. And here, this is my first little think of the game. I didn't spend that long here, but I had to try to figure out what's the difference between just dropping the bishop back to c4 where I would normally put it, because if castles, then it transposes. So is there a downside to playing bishop c4, which I do end up playing in the game? The only reason I could think that um, that bishop c4 would not be ideal was if knight b6 worked. But I thought on knight b6, the knight's sort of going the wrong way. It's going to the queen side. It can't really develop anywhere else on the queen side. It's stopping the pawn from going to b5. So it felt like at that point I could just play bishop e2, and the knight is not any worse. Or the bishop, like the tempo that I lose going bishop c4 e2 is not really. It doesn't really matter because the move that black achieved in that moment was knight to b6. Um, so bishop c4 actually, yeah, it's a fine move. Knight b6, bishop e2. I also want to take a little bit of time to mention that I did look at the engine for these games. I looked at the machine, and I'm probably not going to do that going forward because, well, I mean, in the tournament, it's much easier for me to look at it after the game and sort of understand what I did wrong and whatever. But I think that for content purposes, and also probably for my own improvement, it's important to do the analysis after the game without having looked at the computer, so that then I can give my raw thoughts first, and then we can discover together what actually happened. I think it's more interesting that way. So for this tournament, the next 5 games, we're going to be doing it. I'll just have the engine on during the game. But for future tournaments, yeah, like Continental Open, I will not look at the engine until making the video for the game. So I'm excited to do that. So we'll see how that goes. But for this tournament, yeah. So bishop g4 is a good move. And I come up with this knight g5 idea. So yeah, the idea of knight b6 and bishop g4 is the only real way to make sense of this move order for black. It's the only thing that you can get out of it. And I come up with the idea of knight g5. The point of knight g5 is I want to keep the knight on the board, and I also still want to play this f5 move that I had looked at in the other line. So knight g5 takes, queen takes, and here I thought black has to castle, because if not castling, then the king is sort of left in the middle, and maybe I'll even have time for e5, but maybe not, but it sort of felt like he should castle and get out of the center, and now I have time to play f5. Um, the knight on b6, it's unclear why it's there. You know, it's the knight normally on d7, where it might be better suited on one of these two squares. Now it's on b6, so this sort of makes some sense, I thought. And uh, if you just play a nothing move, then I'm threatening to take on g6, sort of, because you can't play h takes because of, I thought, at least in the game, that I would just be able to go queen g4, queen h4, and checkmate. And now the rook is open on f7, so it's hard to move the rook away and then the king. Knight d7 didn't feel the most accurate, and as it turns out that it is an inaccuracy because of what I do, which is takes. And now f takes is not force, but on h takes I was going to play queen g4, and I thought this position was very unpleasant for black. It's difficult to stop all of these threats. Um, yeah, the computer shows that there is a defense with either bishop d4 check or queen e7, but these moves are sort of difficult, and the black position is already quite bad. Even if you do end up surviving, I have all my pieces are very active. So f takes, and now I rush things a little bit. Um, I play knight e6, which is not the most critical continuation. I was looking at this move bishop e3, but I was sort of it didn't it because okay, the reason why is because on rook takes f1, I really want to recapture with the rook, not with the queen or the king. So I would need to find a useful square to move the bishop to. Bishop f4 is not a good square because rook takes f4 is possible, but also it just gets in the way. Bishop d2 I considered for a little while, but I didn't like the idea of knight c2, knight d4. So uh, so bishop e3, I did look at it, but I thought there were some bishop d4 ideas, and I thought, knight e6 is very forcing line. I get the knight on the square. I can always support it. Um, but it's just not the right direction for the game to go, which I realized in the game as well. After knight e6, rook takes, queen takes f1, and queen e7. And then once again, I play a sort of subpar move. I should probably just play something like queen e2 as the engine shows. I realize this in the game as well, because on bishop g5, which is the move I played, I really thought that, you can't move the queen really anywhere, so you need to block with something. Blocking with the knight feels like it should just lose immediately. So bishop f6 I thought was going to be played, and then I thought I could just play bishop h6, and this would stop, knight f8 or rook f8. And I felt that if I had control over the f8 square, um, at least from the knight going to f8, then I wouldn't have to worry about this knight on e6 getting attacked. It's sort of just going to be able to stay there for the rest of the game. The problem is there is bishop f6, because on bishop h6, let's just put this on the board. If I play bishop h6 here, then there's knight c2, knight d4, the same idea as what happened in the game. So I realize in this position that I do need to take on f6, and if I had known that I would have ended up needing to take on f6, then probably in this position I would just play queen e2, because queen e2 I felt, it's very solid. It keeps the knight from getting to this square. The queen, basically just need to cover both of these squares, and then that keeps the knight out of the game. The knight has no other squares. So queen e2 probably should have been played, but okay. Instead, we get this position. I play queen e2 now, and knight f8. Now, I really don't want to trade off the knight, um, because if I trade, then I'm left with this e4 pawn, which is going to be backward, sort of annoying to defend, and eventually the black knight will get back into the game. So I start with rook f1. It's a tempo gaining move, so it's not difficult to start with this move. And now in this position, In this position, I play queen g4, which is not a good move. Really, I should... Yeah, queen c4 is a findable move, I think. Knight f4 is sort of strange. I don't fully understand this move. But queen c4 is the same idea as queen g4. Basically, I just want to be able to, on takes, take with a pawn and support the knight. I don't, because the alternative to supporting the knight is trading. And I thought trading was just sort of an unpleasant, um, like this is sort of just an unpleasant endgame for white. It's probably survivable, but unpleasant. So queen c4 is the same idea as queen g4. The problem is on queen g4, there's knight d3, and the knight gets back to e5. So queen on c4 would have stopped knight d3, and this would have held some sort of minimal advantage for white. Queen g4, knight d3 occurs, and I play h4. I realize the position's already kind of difficult to play at this point because the e5 square is now gone. You know, I have a knight on e6, so that's my sort of counterplay. But he's just going to trade that knight off. This is going to be These are going to be the knights that are left, and his knight's going to be on e5. So I'm going to be worse. So I thought, okay, I have to at least weaken the kingside pawns. I play h4, knight e5, queen h3. And after rook e8, I really need to uh, just move the knight, or I in the game I trade everything because I just sort of got... I'm not fully in time pressure yet, but I have to start playing moves relatively quick. And it just felt like the all of the trades, if they occurred, then um, at least I'm simplifying the position. So I just trade everything and play h5, which is a reasonable continuation. But if I want to not admit that I'm worse and try to keep playing for some initiative, then knight g5 I think makes much more sense. Um, so we get this position, and after h5, he plays queen f4, which I felt wasn't the most accurate move, but I couldn't quite see what I was doing. It felt like I almost have like a perpetual sort of thing. Um, but I started spending a lot of time on the move knight e2 because I was looking at these lines, knight e2, queen takes e4, and then queen e6, and I saw that his knight couldn't retreat. So I would probably be able to force a perpetual actually with, like, if his king ever goes to h6, then I'll have queen f8. Whereas if the queen is on f4, I don't have queen f8. So I think for a while, I look at all these lines, I eventually play knight e2, and then he doesn't take the pawn because taking the pawn probably results in an immediate draw. Um, I guess the machine shows that actually there probably is a way for black to play on, but yeah, otherwise it's fine move. But there's the move queen g4, and queen g4, the evaluation originally is like -1, but I think that if you just let the computer think for a while, it's going to realize that this knight endgame is just winning for black. I have to take it. I have to take on g6, knight c3, king f7, and yeah, here I don't play king f1 because I was worried about... um, what was I worried about? I thought that his knight got to d2 somehow, like king f1, knight check. I guess it doesn't get there. I was Really, I should play king f1 because what I do in the game, I'll show you how the game ends. b3, because I was worried about... I think I must have been worried about knight e5, knight c4, knight d2, but I'm in time for that, I think. Like if I go here, knight e5, I was probably looking at king... Yeah, this is what I was looking at. I was looking at king e2, knight c4, and I saw b3, knight a5, and I thought, okay, I need to stop the knight from getting to c4. So I played b3, but b3 is just way too slow because now his king just gets in. Um, and I just resign in this position because it's completely lost knight endgame. So maybe there was a bit of better resistance at that point, but I think that the real culprit of the loss was the move knight e2. I should just, hg or queen e6 and just say, my knight is actually very nice on c3. There's queen c1 check as a threat, but if his queen runs away and takes the b pawn, then I'm definitely going to have enough counterplay against the king to make a draw. So yeah, it was a pretty well played game. There were some inaccuracies, I would say, throughout. Um, Probably first in accuracy if we just go back to over here. I mean, knight g5 is not inaccuracy, I don't think. It's just an interesting way of playing. So the first inaccuracy I would say was probably knight e6. I think knight e6 is an inaccuracy because it's just rushing things. I should just play bishop e3 and allow myself to be able to recapture on f1 with the rook. The next issue, bishop g5 is not the most accurate move. If I had seen bishop h6, knight c2, knight d4, I would have just played queen e2 and developed naturally, not have allowed the knight to enter the game. And I also keeping the bishops on is maybe a little bit beneficial as long as I have some sort of pressure on the f-file. The bishop might be useful. Also, my knight could have maybe threatened to take the bishop on g7 in some lines. Knight f8, rook f1, all of these moves are fine. Probably the other move, taking on f8 is probably not the most ambitious. Knight g5 would have been better for counterplay purposes. And then the final, well, maybe not the final issue, but like the real final issue, knight e2 is not good. Now, yeah, b3 is the losing. I guess that's the losing move, but position is already probably just borderline lost. So yeah, that was round one. It was a loss. I was sort of, expecting to lose this game. I'm playing against a very high rated opponent, but it was sort of upsetting that I wasn't able to, whenever you have a position where you're like almost in an end game and there's like a lot of counterplay and then you don't hold it, even if it's against someone who's 500 points higher rated than you, it still doesn't feel great. So that was round one. Stay tuned for round two. I'll try to get these out relatively close to each other. And yeah, thanks for watching.